Hey, listeners, today I am so excited to have a psychiatrist that is not far from me. And I met her because works locally in the city where I live, which is Sacramento. And she is one of those few psychiatrists who actually know a lot about mental health and principles that actually help outside of just pharmaceuticals. So I am so honored to have Carolyn Giroux with me today, and I'll let her introduce herself because she knows a whole lot more about her than I do.
Thank you so
So,
much, Bronwyn, for
yeah,
inviting me. I'm really honored to be part of this conversation with you today. Like you said, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a professor of clinical psychiatry at UC Davis Health. And I've been doing this for about 25 years, if you include my 5-year residency program in Montreal.
mm,
And I'm also a holistic psychiatrist or lifestyle psychiatrist. I really look at all the dimensions of a person and their symptoms. And I work with them on developing a plan to make some lifestyle adjustments so that they feel better and
yeah,
they can thrive. And I'm also known as a trauma psychiatrist. So I tend to use that less and less because I feel like trauma as a kind of overwhelming connotation, but that's the reality. I do treat survivors of trauma, and I do group therapy for survivors of trauma. So I've learned a lot from my patients, and they're incredibly resilient and wise. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be working closely with them. And I'm also working at the Indigenous Telehealth Clinic. So I also work with the Native populations, and I've learned a ton from those communities as well.
yeah,
As you probably imagine, they have experienced a lot of transgenerational trauma, social trauma.
yeah,
So this is kind of my niche, right? Working with survivors of trauma, but also looking at what kept them going and how can we expand on that.
mm,
So this is really where I'm the most comfortable is like trying to transcend adversity.
yeah.
And I'm persons, survivors, advocates, children, teenagers, advocates. I feel like we need to do more for our youth. And I'm very passionate about the work that I do. And I'm also a writer, a blogger, and a podcaster like you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what makes, well, I want to say the most impressive out of all the things you said to me is that you are a mental health practitioner slash expert who learns from your patients, because not all of us, whether we're just, therapists like me or psychiatrists with the MD, very few people listen and learn from their patients, like you just said. And I think that is the key. But tell me, like, what is on the forefront of your mind right now? Because I know you just shared with me before we started recording, there's something very much on the forefront that you're kind of needing to unpack, and we can unpack that together. And I think will relate to everyone listening, because it's something that we're all humans and we all experience this particular type of trauma. So go ahead and share that with me, please.
Yes. Thank you, Bronwyn.
Mhm.
It's about sexual exploitation, trauma, harm. I have been really sensitized about this issue for most of my life. I have heard countless stories of people I love, people I worked with, people I went to school with, I grew up with, who have eventually disclosed that they had suffered from some inappropriate sexual behavior.
Yeah,
We can call it trauma, assault, abuse,
sure.
incest, name it,
Yeah.
right? There are
Yeah.
all kinds of permutation.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I mean, it's hard to ignore the fact that it's just being unpacked, all of those networks that have been created to exploit children and teenagers and young adults. And the society is getting really upset about that finally. I feel
You're
like we
referring to the Epstein files right now. Currently, we're at in mid February 2026. So, yes, the Epstein files are starting to really come to the
yes,
light, and it is bringing a lot of things to light on a micro level for a lot of us too, because people are starting to go, oh, I can relate to this, right? So, yeah, keep going.
yes. Yes. So this is a very, I would say, horrific,
Mhm.
atrocious, sinister,
Yeah.
kind of situation. And trauma, when it happens to a person, we can't say it's minor versus major sexual assault. It happens completely to the person.
Yeah.
And it creates a lot of confusion, a lot of shame, a lot of
Yes.
isolation. And I really hope that the survivors who have experienced anything like that can find a trusted person to go to ask for help,
Mhm.
because that's the first step, right, in breaking the cycle, is that knowing that you're not alone. Even though
Yeah.
when it happens to you, you might feel like you're alone, that you've done something wrong. No, it happens, and that's how these perpetrators work, right? They isolate their victims so that they don't really
Yeah.
connect with each other and develop a movement. So we've seen that with the Me Too movement. It takes one person to break the silence, and then, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, so many other people follow, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we stay alert, that we stay awake during this time,
Mhm.
and very attentive to our own stories, whatever is emerging right now.
Mhm.
When we think about sexuality, right, this is a normal dimension. It is part of life. It's our one of our divine gifts.
Mm. Yeah.
However, for many reasons, this gets repressed, shamed,
Yeah.
uh, controlled, and then often a child will grow up with all kinds of confusion around that, right?
Yes.
I find the sexual development to not be harmonious, unfortunately, for everyone. And
Right.
however, it's normative. It's normative to discover that we have a beautiful body, to
Mm.
discover that there are differences, to discover the pleasure of the senses, right?
Yeah.
But because it is so taboo, still stigmatized, it gets weaponized, it gets exploited.
Yeah.
So sexual trauma is not always what we think it is, right? It's
Mm.
a stranger will grab you in a dark alley at night and rape
Mhm.
you in the
Yeah.
bushes or something. This is the image I grew up with.
Yeah.
This is way more, this can be way more subtle. And
Mhm.
it's really about a power dynamic.
Well,
It-
I want to, yeah, let me pause here
Mhm.
because I think that is so important to point out that when it's subtle, it's slippery
Yeah.
and it leaves this big question mark instead of like, oh, I was abused for a bunch of reasons. Because with sex, you know, even as young children, our body parts still enjoy it. There's still a pleasurable aspect to it. So it's hard to
Mhm.
see ourselves as a victim of abuse when we actually are enjoying it, when our bodies are finding pleasure from it. So that
Yeah.
makes it very messy, right? It makes it more confusing. And then the other thing, and these are two big things which we can spend lots of time on, but I don't know if you've heard the saying, the trauma behind the trauma.
Mm.
So
Tell me more.
because there is, research shows that there is a significant difference between the people who will go and find help and
Mhm.
get out of that isolation and say, hey, something isn't right and I need you to stand with me or support me, and the people who don't. And
Mhm.
what they find, that's the trauma behind the trauma, because the people who don't, the children who don't, the youth who don't, the adults who don't, the trauma is that at an unconscious level, they don't believe their attachment figure or figures will believe them
Oh.
or
Mhm.
will do anything about it. And they believe that for a good reason. So
Yeah.
often the trauma behind the trauma is emotional neglect. And
Yes.
so, a kid who feels seen by his parent or her parents, they're going to go say something because they know that they can trust the parent. They know the parent will absolutely not shame them or say, "What
Mhm.
did you do?" That
Yes.
they trust that. And so that's also something I think that's really important to address.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, because I have examples in mind exactly about this situation you're describing, where the attachment with the parental figures was secure. The child felt safe, could tell the parent. The
Yeah.
parent got help promptly for the child, therapy, assistance. legal proceedings behind the scenes, whatever, because these perpetrators need to be held accountable. But first and foremost, it's the child's safety that counts. Removing the child from a situation and making sure that their emotional needs for recovery are met. What is it that you need? And yes, I believe you, and I'm sorry
Yes.
this happened to you. These
Yes.
are things that seem right, logical, simple.
Mhm.
However, we know that in some cases, parents will, in fact, yes, blame the child, deny this happened, basically
Yes.
gaslight them.
Yes.
This is invalidation trauma. And
Right.
I've written about that because I've seen that as almost worse than the trauma
Yes.
itself.
Yes.
You agree?
Absolutely. That is the
Yes.
worst because that's
Hmm.
your attachment figure. They're supposed to love you. They're supposed to believe you. I mean, the level of betrayal is much
Hmm.
greater, right?
It is. So
Mhm.
that's another level of intervention that needs to happen for that child and adult later on to work on. But it is possible to find help. But yes, you are correct that the child needs to feel like they have someone that they can go to talk about that, and they can overcome that trauma. The trauma does not define them, right?
Mhm.
The trauma, life adversity shapes us in a way, shapes our defenses because we attempt to heal as we go through this confusing
Mhm.
time and terrifying time. But it doesn't define us. When we choose that we're no longer a victim, that
Mhm.
this tells more about the perpetrator's shame than our own,
Yes.
we can free ourselves.
Yes. I agree. I think the problem is this is for some people the what we would call easily call abuse,
Hmm.
to a young person, if they're only experiencing neglect from their
Yeah.
attachment figures, that abuser, let's say that abuser is an older brother. And I've
Hmm.
actually heard, if I've had clients with this story,
Yeah.
that actually felt good to them because they felt seen by
Mm.
that older brother. They didn't like that they had to engage sexually to feel seen, but they
Hmm.
did need to feel seen. And so, neurons that fire together wire together. And so in their brain,
Hmm.
their little brain is conflating now
Yeah.
this sexuality experience with feeling seen and feeling loved. And that was the only time they felt that. And so that it's hard to call that trauma for that young
Mhm.
girl because to them
Yeah.
it's confusing, right? It's very, very, very sticky, very messy.
Right. You are right. It gets paired sometimes with a seemingly positive situation. And that's what predators use. Like they groom children. There's no physical violence. They just attract them, bait them, and then engage in things that are a little bit startling or
Mhm.
very inappropriate and confusing. So it is very hard to make sense of that. And I think it takes therapy, like with
Mm.
people like you, experience like you, with that kind of wounds, right? You
Yeah.
have to, you have heard a lot of stories and you're able to help others with all of your insights and wisdom. So I think it takes work on the self quite a bit and learning to forgive ourselves too. And
Mhm.
also accepting that we might not have all the answers. Why did this person do this to me?
Mm.
Or what does that mean for our
Mm.
relationship?
Mm.
It takes time. It takes time. And I see that there's a cycle. People who have been engaging in those sexual behaviors that are not appropriate often have been victimized themselves and they didn't even know at the time they were, and it can get normalized. It feels
Yeah.
like, well, this is what we do, this is what we did in the family. It's not even talked about. It's there's not even the word trauma attached to it or incest. And I really stay away from these words when I assess my
Mhm.
patients. I say, has anyone done anything to you that you felt was scary or confusing or uncomfortable?
Mhm.
And this is when the story can come. And it's, yeah, I always stayed with that kind of feeling that it was
Mhm.
strange or confusing or,
Mhm.
and it's really I find it's kind of de-shaming because victims, as you know, are often blamed, right?
Yeah.
What did you do? Or you provoked the person, or
Yeah.
the
Or
parents. Yeah.
or you enjoyed it, right? I mean, let's be honest. Like I've heard that. I've heard some parents say you enjoyed it and maybe they did. Maybe they did because we are wired to enjoy, sexual pleasure, and that doesn't make them wrong, but it feels wrong. And so they feel so much shame that they
Yes.
don't see themselves as victims, right?
Yes, exactly. They totally take the full ownership if they say, "Well, I experienced a physical sensation that was good or that was
Mm,
exciting." I heard that too. They were actually physiological responses
mm,
that would indicate that, oh yeah, they had a good time or an orgasm, but it was peripherally induced. This is not, their whole body was not fully
mm,
on
mm,
board with this, and they have to
mm.
give themselves permission to realize that it's nuanced,
Yeah.
that it's not okay, you had this response, therefore that meant you consented. I think consent is a very important
Mm,
framework here,
mm,
and I don't think we have a good consent literacy yet.
mm.
Certainly not when I was a teenager. I wish I was told that. Like consent is not under, it should not be obtained under coercion. And, it's not constant. It's not like you don't get a life pass to someone once they allowed you
Yeah.
to touch them, right? So
Right.
there's so many elements to consent, so many parameters that kids should know about and that would empower them.
Well, like you're saying with the grooming, like the whole goal is to kind of ebb away at the
Yeah.
barrier to consent. And so if that child is enjoying this attention that they're only getting from the
Mhm.
older, let's say the older brother,
Yeah.
it's like they do consent because they just love that attention. And it's like this slow,
Mhm.
insidious, I'm going to take this power I have as your older brother who I'm winning your attention, I'm winning your loyalty because I'm giving this attention to you, and now I'm going to, abuse that loyalty. And so
Mhm.
that consent just kind of gets eroded, right?
Yeah, consent would apply when there's no power dynamic, right? And it's
Yeah.
but when there is already a differential, there can't be consent because the younger person cannot make an informed decision about that. It's like they're in a position of vulnerability, just like you mentioned. Let's
Yeah.
say there's parental neglect.
Mhm.
That makes a child extra vulnerable to all
Yes.
kinds of predators, whether they're in the family, whether in the
Mm.
school, in the
Yeah.
neighborhood. Because the
Yes.
child yearns for attention. The child yearns for being seen and
Yes.
loved.
Yes. And, you know, in a spiritual sense, I believe sexuality is supposed to be paired with love,
Mhm.
and it
Yeah.
is used, it's manipulated to make someone feel loved, but to
Mhm.
get something from it, right? For the abuser. And so again, it's so insidious. I
Yes.
also think when that person is enjoying that sexual experience, but they're still a victim to it because it is not truly consensual, it's like their
Mhm.
own body betrays them
Oh,
and they
yes.
lose trust in their own body. And I have heard, I actually had a roommate years ago who she was raised in a cult, in a sex cult, and her mom told her as an adult, "Oh yeah, I loaned you out to men when you were a baby." That was like part of the sex cult. That was considered loving. That was considered loving to a baby. That was considered loving. Yeah, it's these cults sometimes get so sick. But this young woman, and now she's in her early 20s, she became very religious, but she said that if she went out with a guy, even though she didn't want to have sex till she got married, she couldn't say no. And she said, I think it's because I don't know, it's like I think it's because those boundaries were already crossed, and there's something like
Mhm.
that keeps me from
Right.
being able to say no. And I just thought after that, I thought, you know what? I'm never going to judge a woman who I think is really, or even a man, I should say, that I think is really promiscuous and really sexual
Mhm.
because I don't know their history. And if their boundaries were eroded early on, and
Yeah.
that makes it hard for them to say no, why would I judge them? Why would society judge them? We don't know what's
Mhm.
going on. They don't even know what's going on, right? There's so
Right.
much at play here.
Thank you for saying that, Bronwyn, because I feel the same about people who have multiple partners, and they're labeled as being promiscuous. And it's even one of the diagnostic criteria for a manic episode or
Mhm.
bipolar disorder.
Sure.
And I cannot tell you how many people, especially women, who came to me saying they were bipolar and they had been diagnosed on the basis of having been sexually promiscuous. And when I dug in their story,
Mm,
played detective,
mm,
what happened to you? How was like your first dating experiences? They say they had been abused in childhood.
mhm.
Then something went in my mind, a light bulb went on. I thought, but this is trauma reenactment.
Yeah, right.
They are trying to make sense of something that happened to them at a young age when they didn't
Mhm.
have words to put on that experience. It was confusing. There was power dynamics. They're trying to
Mhm.
triumph over that, their body, all
Yes.
unconsciously, right? They want to reclaim their body, their sexuality. They want to overcome that and do closure. People are just attempting to heal, whether they use drugs, whether they engage in unsafe sex, whether they overwork, overexercise, are overachievers. This is all an attempt to kind of restore some integrity or
Mm,
dignity or cohesiveness. You know, it's putting the pieces of yourself back together the best way you can.
mhm.
I think once people understand that, they can start to reclaim their power and decide, no, I didn't have boundaries because nobody taught me that I had. Now I'm going to learn what are they and
Mhm.
I'm going to assert them. It's never too late.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, that when our body kind of betrays us and there's
Mm.
shame there, we don't trust our own body, we dissociate from our own body, and it's like we don't have that full ownership of it almost, and I do agree that then when we are promiscuous with other people, it's like we're trying to I like what you said, and I would add, it's like we're trying to, like, gain mastery over
Yeah.
something where we didn't
Yeah.
feel that mastery because we were mastered, right? And so now we're trying to master it finally, play
Yes.
acting in this other role with this other person or
Mhm.
situation. I think that's really accurate.
Yeah, it's like trauma, okay, again, but on my own terms, so to speak, unconsciously again, right? So, like you
Mhm.
said, it's mastery, mastery of something that people didn't have control over. You know, like you mentioned dissociation, the
Yeah.
freeze response. I like to talk about the four F's in trauma:
Mm.
fight, flight, freeze, or faint.
Mm.
So, when something happens to you, our survival brain, you know, if we feel threatened, we'll feel like fighting back, but sometimes
Yep.
we can't because the person is way too strong for us. It would not help us to try to fight. It would cause more problems. So
Mhm.
we'll try to flight, we'll try to escape.
Mhm.
Sometimes we can't even escape. What's left? The dissociation.
Yep,
We
that's
have
it.
to take leave of our body. We
Mhm.
dissociate. And
Mhm.
sometimes this trauma that happens that made us dissociated will keep repeating itself. So the dissociation will happen when we're triggered, but it will also become almost a coping mechanism. So we might seek to recreate situations where we actually feel dissociated because we don't have to deal with our emotions. So
Mhm.
sex that is promiscuous,
Mhm.
that is compulsive,
Mhm.
could become a way to dissociate. We see that
Yeah.
also in victims of trauma who become addicted to porn. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's a way for them to dissociate. They're stressed, they're going to go to
Yes.
porn.
Yes. Yes. I couldn't agree more. And I think really what we're dissociating from is the shame. And
Yeah,
because shame, humans cannot tolerate shame because
no.
shame is not, you know, babies are not born into the world with shame. It is not native to humans. We're not supposed to feel it, but we
Mhm.
do because we were violated, because we maybe, you know, then, you know, shame begets shame where we were violated. And then we try to reenact that. And then that creates more shame. And we're
Yeah.
trying to dissociate from that shame. And it's this like never ending cycle, right?
So glad you're talking about that, Bronwyn. Yes. It's even shameful to talk about shame, to say we're ashamed. It's that bad, right?
Mm.
And it's so important. It's such a core emotion associated with trauma. We have a session dedicated to that topic in the group therapy I offer for survivors. And there's a lot there. And there's a patient once who said in an exercise, he said, "Shame, stop lying to me." And
Wow.
it's so powerful.
Wow.
So looking at the shame, having a conversation with it, laser beaming it
Hmm.
will help us be free from it. We
Hmm.
can't run away from it. It will just grow bigger.
Right.
It will become in our shadow. And then what happens is like when we put all kinds of stuff in our shadow, they grow, they get dysregulated, and then we act out. And then it gets
Mhm.
really ugly.
Right. Yeah. 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 I agree because when we try to distance ourselves from the shame, we're in denial of it. It takes on this life of its own, right?
Yes.
And it
Yes.
becomes like this monster in the closet. And now we're acting out and we're like betraying ourselves more because we're not facing it. And really the goal, I love that your patient said like shame stop lying to me because I always say shame is a liar, right? Shame
Hmm.
is a liar.
It
Shame
is.
doesn't say, hey, you betray yourself because you were violated, because
Hmm.
you lost, bodily autonomy, because
Hmm.
you have dissociated from yourself. It doesn't help us see these things that we're talking about. Shame just says, you're just bad. You're worthless. You're sick.
Yes.
It doesn't say you made a mistake. It's okay. You're human. Humans make mistakes. That's what humans do best. And the good
Yes.
the good humans learn from them. And that's the difference. The good humans learn from each and every mistake, but we still make lots more mistakes. And then we make amends for those
Mhm.
mistakes in whatever way we can, through forgiveness, through seeking forgiveness, through forgiving ourselves. But shame says, nope, nope, nope. None of that.
Mhm.
You're just worthless. You're just
Mhm.
horrible. You're just a very sick person. You're subhuman.
Yes. That's really the, I think, duality between the ego or the left side of the brain and the compassion,
Mm,
spiritual, more integrated part of the brain, which is the right hemisphere. So having a way to rebalance that is really important. Really meditating, having self compassion will help this shame shrink because the
mm,
shame is just a story the brain tells that's it's creating from the
mm.
ego, and it's not real. It is an illusion. The ego
Yeah.
is an illusion, and the ego
Mm,
has these narratives that are self denigrating and expanding the shame. And we know that it's not who the person is. You're
that's
not your shame, right? You're not, we're not our shame. So,
no.
yeah, it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And so I have my clients put their shame in a box, in a cardboard box,
Mm.
and give it back to,
Yes.
the perpetrator, whether that is an abuser, whether it's just a parent for shaming them, or
Mhm.
neglecting them, as we're talking about.
Mhm.
Even it can be their own shame from their own poor choices. And we
Yeah.
can throw that box in the middle of the ocean.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
This is so important, Bronwyn. You're talking about rituals. I
Hmm.
think tangible rituals can be very powerful.
Yeah.
Because in her book, I don't know if you read the book, Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman, when she
Yeah.
talked about rape being an act of political terror, and we know it's not about sex, right? Rape, sexual assaults, it's
Mhm.
more about power,
Yes.
and sex becomes weaponized to terrorize victims. She It was a compelling book, and she emphasized that survivors of rape or sexual assault do not have a a cemetery or a place to grieve, right?
Mhm.
So we need to create those rituals for ourselves
Mhm.
to heal and to free ourselves from those events we haven't chosen. So I love your image of a cardboard box. I would invite our audience to develop their own rituals, whether it's a fire, whether it's a
Mhm.
yeah, throwing something in the ocean, writing something, a
Yeah.
letter, burning it.
Mhm.
These can be so grounding
Yeah.
and help us reclaim our freedom, because if we don't address that, those stories and the shame, they live rent free in our head.
Yeah.
So we need to really put them out of our minds, out of our bodies, and
Mhm.
start the process of, okay, becoming who we are meant to become, who we want to become.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. One thing I've done for myself lately is, I'll look back on my life and be like, oh man, that was really cringy when I did that. And instead of saying, oh, I'm so ashamed of younger
Mhm.
Bronwyn, I'll say, I just really regret doing that.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important that we distinguish between those two things because humans are always going to regret the things that we did that were hurtful to ourselves and
Mhm.
others. That's
Yeah.
healthy and that's
Yes.
fine, but we shouldn't shame ourselves. We really need to have a
Mhm.
disposition towards ourself that is not only compassionate, but really true because
Yes.
shame is a liar, right? So as long
Mhm.
the more we can live in reality and just go, you know what, I was human, I didn't know better. That was a stupid thing to do. I regret it and I'm learning from it. I have learned from it. I'm not going to repeat that. That's very different than being like, oh my God, I was such an idiot. I hate myself or whatever, having that shame.
Mhm. I love that you say that too because I can relate, and
Mhm.
I used to be, yeah, feel shame for a lot of things, poor decisions that I made or things that I've said. Oh my gosh, what was I thinking?
Mhm.
No, I'm like, okay, I would do this differently now.
Yeah.
You know, it's like holding ourselves with compassion, with
Mhm.
understanding, and knowing that we were doing something and dealing with the situation the best way we can with the tools we had at the time.
Yeah.
And the good news is it gets better because we have more wisdom as we accumulate years. And it's wonderful actually
Mhm.
to realize that. I hope everyone can approach their own past mistakes with curiosity, more than
Mhm.
shame or self-judgment, because it's not helpful to be judgmental. We can, of course, take ownership.
Mhm.
That's different, right? It's not being
Right.
ashamed. It's like, okay, I take responsibility. I did this. I messed up. How can I do better? But the shame will paralyze us. The shame
Yes.
will
Yes.
swamp.
Absolutely. It is absolutely
Mhm.
debilitating. Shame is
Mhm.
debilitating. It is paralyzing. So it's interesting because I think of like 12-step groups. I have a lot of qualms with a lot of the things that are taught in 12-step groups, but I think the reason they are, for the most part, as successful as they are, is there's all these people sharing their stories and they're like, oh, I'm not the only one. Oh my God.
Yes.
I'm not alone. All these other people have done the
Yes.
same thing, and that destigmatizes
Yeah.
our humanity. It's like, oh, and I think that's actually why it's easier for me now to have a more compassionate attitude towards my former self and just say, I regret that because I'm
Mhm.
a therapist. So I hear all these other people's stupid mistakes all the time. So it's kind of like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're all human. We all do stupid things. It's okay. I don't need to like I'm not gonna do everything perfectly. I'm a human.
Yes, yes. And it's beautiful. It's really
Mhm.
nice to break that sense of aloneness and
Mm,
actually maybe have some fun with our past mistakes or
mhm,
and see them as lessons. That's really how I reframe this for myself and people I work with. It's like there are no mistakes. It's only lessons, right? What is it that you got from that situation? What did it teach you about you?
mm,
About humanity, about others, about relationships.
mhm.
Yeah.
So going back to, like, where we started,
Hmm.
I see the neglect from an attachment figure from a parent, um, as where all of that shame I mean, neglect, first and foremost, creates a lot of shame. We talk about trauma, but a lot of us don't see neglect as trauma. We see trauma as, like,
Hmm. Yeah.
something came out of the blue and happened to us, but we don't
Right.
just see the day-to-day
Yeah.
emotional neglect of a parent as
Hmm.
traumatic as it actually is, because it does create a lot of shame for a child. And parents, even a really good-hearted parent who's really trying to do well is going to emotionally neglect their child at some point too. So that shame will get created regardless of that parent and, their parenting approach. So we just have to see that and we have to say, you know what?
Hmm.
Little Bronwyn, that neglect that you
Yeah.
experienced from your parent, that's not a reflection of a you problem.
Hmm.
That's a reflection of a them problem, right?
Yeah.
Whether it was intentional or completely unintentional, it doesn't matter. It still creates that shame. And so I have to do
Mm,
that for myself. And so going back to where you started with, you talked about this paper that you wrote about people, well, we didn't actually talk about it on the recording yet, but young people, children who are exposed early to pornography and what
mhm,
that does to them. And if we
mhm.
can see that that doesn't happen in a vacuum, that happens
Right.
usually when it becomes harmful. Usually that child has an experience of neglect, right? Those are the children that who
Mhm,
yeah, the most harm is from the children who experience, significant emotional neglect. So if we
mhm,
can start with that, is helping each and every individual see the neglect. I know it creates shame, but let's put all that shame in this
mhm,
big cardboard box and let's throw it in the middle of the ocean, because that neglect is your
mhm.
parents' shame. It's not yours.
Yes.
Mhm.
Again, I agree with you. Neglect is unfortunately not seen as trauma yet, but if we understood what it does to the brain, we would
Mhm.
see this as trauma, and we know the effect on the long term. It's a complex form of trauma. It's trauma by lacking something, right? It's like
Yeah.
not having a sense of security. Like it's basically unsupervised parenting, parents who don't supervise their children, parents who don't have rules or like a curfew or a structure. The
Mhm.
child cannot feel safe
Mhm.
if the parents are too just neglectful. There's a lack of sense of safety, just like there is when there's abuse, right? Direct
Mhm.
abuse, the parent is
Yeah.
physically or verbally abusive.
Yeah.
Neglect looks different, but it does the same to the brain. So it's
Yes.
important, yes, for the child to know that, hey, your parents did this to you or didn't do this to you when you needed it for a reason. What were they trying to heal from their own childhood by not being parenting available to you as they were trying to parent? And now I
Yeah.
see my whole life like this, and it goes generations above my parents too, right? Like I'm an Xer. I was neglected, and not just because I'm an Xer, but for other reasons. I did not feel seen fully
Yep.
as I am, and I don't think my emotional needs were met.
Right.
It took me a long time to realize that it was not because I was a boring person, that I was not worth the attention, because for a while I thought that.
Mm.
I thought I'm so quiet, nobody's interested in me, or
Mm.
nobody was interested in my emotions really. But we
Mhm.
need to reparent ourselves when we realize that, and not think that it's because there was something wrong with us. It's because our parents might not have been equipped. They might have been emotionally immature. And of course, a child can't see that. We need to see our parents as all powerful, right? Otherwise, we're going to feel panicked. Oh, they can't protect us, they're inadequate. But
Mm.
no, it's with our eyes of adults that we can see that and
Mhm.
understand that and
Yeah.
have compassion for ourselves and ultimately for them if we can, right? But we
Yeah.
have a work to do first of all with ourselves. Yeah.
Yes, and I also wanna add neglect, for me, in my childhood, neglect meant no eye contact.
Mm.
Um, and my mother had a personality disorder, but often when a parent has a personality disorder, which is very common, what it appears to the child is it seems like the parent is really depressed, because a lot of times parents with like borderline personality disorder, when they're in front of other people, they're on and
Mm.
they are like, all that. They're just very attuned to other people, or they're on stage and they're performing and their eyes
Mhm.
are open and they show signs of life. And then when that parent
Mhm.
is just with the child or the children, they're off because their own narcissistic supply needs are not being met. And so for me, it very much felt like my mom just had chronic depression, but only with me. And so it's very confusing to a child because you see, oh, she comes alive with other people, but with me, there's no eye contact. There's no even like expression to her voice. It's just very flat, you know,
Mhm.
and it's very much like depression, but my little brain, like every child's little brain, thinks, oh, that's me. That's because I'm not enough. Right.
Yeah,
And there's
exactly.
that shame. So it can be something so, again, insidious, so subtle, you don't see it. But that's very, very common. I actually see that in a lot of my clients where they want to just remember the parent when they were on. They want
Mm,
to just see mom as fun and outgoing as she was when she was
mm,
having a barbecue. They don't want to remember. They'll block that out.
mm.
All that where the shame came from was mom's usually just off.
Oh my gosh, it's such a compelling example, Bronwyn, because what you're talking about is the discrepancy.
Mhm.
Even like we could make a parallel with the sexual situations when a child felt also cared for in a way
Yes.
while being abused.
Yes.
We have to notice a discrepancy because that means there's something inauthentic there. If
Mhm.
there's some, like something's not quite right, we might not know exactly what, we can't pinpoint it, but at least noticing, there is this kind of duality here. How do I
Mhm.
reconcile that? It's interesting because you were talking about how parents can be performative, basically in social settings, and then they come home to the
Mhm.
child, and the child doesn't have the attention, and it's very disconcerting and perplexing, and
Mhm.
it's even more difficult to reach out for help because we might feel discredited by others. Well, your parent is wonderful because the way they see them is like the way the parent present themselves in a social setting.
Mhm.
um, and it makes it harder for the child even to feel like not feel discredited by others if they were to open up about their own emotional neglect in the household because your parent is like this, like, don't you
Mhm.
see?
Yeah.
So, and I've experienced that too because it's hard for people who know my parents sometimes to
Mhm.
understand my own relationship I had with my parents, each of one
Yeah.
of them, because they have a different version of them.
Right.
So it makes it harder to actually self-validate. Well,
Mhm.
maybe there's something in me that doesn't see my parent correctly, but no, we have to self-validate. We have to really
Mhm.
trust our own experience, our direct experience of the parent. Nobody can say that for us. Nobody can feel that for us.
Right, right, right. That inconsistency is what really messes a child up. When the parent is consistent, it's actually easier. But
Yeah.
when they're inconsistent, so some parents, they'll give that emotional attunement. I've found this to be true personally and with a lot of clients. All of a sudden, when that child like becomes attractive, like let's say around, for me, my mom would tell me I was homely. And then suddenly around age 15, 16, in her eyes, I became very beautiful and she started idealizing me, but I really didn't have her attention until then, and I only had it from being beautiful. That was it. And so for some children, that's then what that matters to them. That's all that they care about is their beauty because that gets them seen. That
Oh,
gives them, that value, right?
wow.
Um, so it could be because they're really smart in school, and that makes the parent feel so good about themselves because they see the
Yes.
child as an extension of them, right? And so then that kid, that becomes so imperative that they always get good grades and go to the best schools because they just have to feel seen. And
Yeah.
whatever that imprint is that makes them seen, but it's the inconsistency that is so disturbing. Also, a lot of us, I believe, experienced a lot of emotional neglect until we became adults. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, for a lot of narcissistic or borderline parents, when that kid is now an adult, they will now look to their child to attune to them. They'll start confiding
Mhm.
in the child um,
Mhm.
about the other parent, for example.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that child is kind of in this it's this weird conflict where they're like, "I don't wanna hear about my other
Mhm.
parent. I don't even wanna be your confidant, but I'm finally
Mhm.
feeling seen by you." And so that
Mhm.
feels good, right?
Yeah, that's a good point here. It seems like there is a currency to get our parents' attention, and whether it's attractiveness, whether it's certain talents or being good in school or being obedient, because a lot of kids will be submissive, they will be over compliant to be accepted and seen and loved. Yeah, that's important to be aware of that, and also notice the discomfort, right? Because even if as adults, it's not appropriate to be spousified. Like
Mm-hmm.
the parents should deal with their own problems together.
Yes,
Even if the child has become an adult, the child remains the child.
that's
Yeah,
right.
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 So there needs to be that boundary there. But
Ab-
parents with personality issues, with attachment trauma, they don't have really good boundaries. They don't have the discernment
Mm-mm.
to realize that, okay, I need to protect my child's well being here. I need to be the parent, even though we talk adult to adult. This is
Mm-hmm.
not, this is actually triangulating a child
Yes.
because they have two parents, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not okay to confide
Mm-hmm.
in the child about the other parent.
Yeah, exactly. So, like you were saying, as we can give that attunement to ourselves, as we
Mhm.
can give
Right.
ourselves the approval we've been seeking, our inner child, that approval, we can
Yeah.
be that mirror that
Yeah.
the parent's supposed to be, but cannot
Mhm.
be for a variety of reasons. As we can give
Mhm.
that to ourselves, as we can outsource that shame, throwing it back into the ocean or giving it back to the parent, and then be that trustworthy mirror that gives ourselves the true reflection of our
Mhm.
value, of our goodness. We don't need
Yeah.
that parent to be something they can't be anymore. It's really powerful.
It is. And to see them as human beings, and also
Mm,
recognize that we learned through this process, because
mm,
forgiveness, that could be another topic. And I'm not saying we have to forgive, but it's like for some people that will be a path,
mhm,
and it's often starting with self-forgiveness. But I feel like starting with really reparenting ourselves, and okay, what is it that I need that I didn't get to have in
mhm,
my life as possibilities? It's not too late. What is it that you can do instead of ruminating, and what is it that you can do now with your life, with what you
mhm,
have? And I think everyone has this capacity, and
mhm.
really feeling like trying to get a parent's attention who's never going to see us, it's a waste of our energy,
Yeah.
and it's self-betrayal.
Mhm,
It's really self-betrayal if
mhm,
there is some kind of conditional love happening, because love should not be conditional anyway. But like, let's say
mhm.
a parent loves with strings attached. Oh,
Yeah.
if you want me to support you, you have to be or say like I do, or think
Mm,
or say, that's that induces a fear of betraying a parent in a child. But the child should fear more the self-betrayal, because
yeah.
we're not here on this earth to live our parents' lives or
Mm,
heal their own trauma.
mhm.
We have our own to deal. We have our own life path, our own
Right.
journey. We don't belong to our parents. We're not supposed to make them happy,
Mhm.
right? Because our parents have their own like unresolved things that they
Yeah,
project onto us. Like you said, we can become the
exactly.
narcissistic extension.
Right. Yeah. So in theory, ideally, the parent is supposed to be the mirror to the child,
Yes.
reflecting the child's value
Yes.
and
Mhm.
lovability back to him or her.
Yes.
But I have found if a parent has shame, which
Mhm.
almost all parents have shame, almost all humans have shame. If if we have shame, we can't do that for our child. We can't
Mhm.
be a trustworthy reflection
Right.
because shame makes it so we don't believe that we as the parent are good. And so we
Mhm.
have to seek our goodness from our child. We
Mhm.
have to the child then becomes the mirror to us of our own
Um,
goodness. Does that make sense?
yes, you said it very well,
Okay.
actually, because yeah, the mirror also that the parent holds in front of the child, it becomes distorted by their own shame. And like you
Yes.
said, yes, they do expect the child to be their mirror, because yes, if the parent has unresolved issues, unresolved attachment wounds, they will expect the child to fulfill that need. And
Mhm.
Yes, that's totally correct. And we need to, again, be aware of that, right? It's
Mhm.
like, it's not shameful to have that. We all have our wounds, but to never recognize them or take
Mhm.
ownership for them, that's a
Mhm.
problem. That
Mhm.
is a problem. Yeah, I like the mirror a lot. It's very Winnicottian, the elements of good enough parenting that Winnicott
Mm.
said is includes mirroring. And it's really the role of the parent is to reflect, to give the child a realistic perception or feedback of who they are. It's not saying you're so wonderful, you're the perfect child. That would make a
Yeah.
child entitled.
Mhm.
Or saying you never do anything right. That's also not true. And that will make the child feel shame. So both can create narcissistic personality. Both approach. The parents is just, you know, viewing the child as perfect because they want to be seen as perfect, or they project their own shame to the child and you can never do anything right. These are the two extremes. So what we
Mm.
want is a parent who can acknowledge their child and love them for who they are with all their flaws and gifts. We all have both.
Yeah, yeah, I like how you're breaking down what mirroring means in practical sense, and I think, to me, a good being a mirror is listening to your
Oh,
child, getting
yeah.
to know her as
Yes.
she is, not as you want to idealize her or as you want to devalue her. It's getting to know her and
Mhm.
listening and helping her feel heard. Because when a
Yes.
child feels heard, they feel seen. Those are one and the same. And that's how
Yes.
you're a mirror. And when I have worked through my own shame, which I have now, um, I'm able to be that mirror to my daughter, to listen and to reflect back to her what I'm hearing. Like, oh, wow, it sounds like you really love this one professor because this one thing, but you don't
Mhm.
like this, so I'm able just to do that because it doesn't have to be about me anymore because I
Nice.
have done away with my own shame. I feel good about me. I don't need her to reflect anything back to me. It's like I'm free just to
Yeah.
mirror her now. And that has not always been true. And I'm going to like give you a very a regretful example. Um, I had a lot of shame in the past, and I remember when my daughter, she started putting on a lot of weight very rapidly, probably in middle school, and I remember just like feeling so much shame about her weight gain. And now I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, why is she a reflection of me? She's not a reflection of me. That was her
Mhm.
own stuff going on, right? But and then I shamed her and she told me, she said, "You're fat shaming me," and I did. And that's because I had my own shame and I needed her to be this reflection of me and I was conflating myself with her. And so now that I have, done my own work to dislodge all that shame, I can just
Mhm.
see her for her, and I
Yes.
know she's not a reflection of me, and I can just appreciate who she is and just listen and be that mirror.
Wow. And this is truly good enough parenting to also be a mirror to yourself as you attempt to be a more accurate mirror to your child, you
Mhm.
know? And this is a beautiful example. And yeah, it's really important to listen. I like what you said because seeing is listening. The mirroring start with listening. And listening means not thinking about what we're going to say as a response.
Yeah,
Listening is about fully hearing,
yeah,
okay, with complete attention without having
mm,
any of our conditionings or biases in the way, right?
yeah,
It's really about, okay, I am not expecting anything. I'm listening. I'm open, and we need to do that more. We're losing that. Our mind
yeah,
is just thinking two steps ahead all the time.
yeah. That's so thank you. Yeah, so sometimes when we're really listening, we don't really have much of a response at all. We just say like, "Wow." And that's
Hmm.
all we need to say or like, "Huh." Like, it's not
Yes.
about our response.
No, it's taking it in.
Yeah,
Taking it in because, like you said, we need to listen so they can feel heard and then seen, right?
yeah,
Feeling heard is huge. I can't tell you how many patients who just come and they just need to unpack their story.
yeah,
They don't want to be fixed because there's nothing to be fixed. They're not broken. They're intact inside, right?
yeah.
They just need to be
Mhm.
accompanied, someone to sit with them. So when you listen to someone, you restore their dignity. Yes, yes, because feeling heard means you're part of this web we call humanity, right? It's I don't live in a silo. I
Mhm.
belong, right? When you
You
feel
belong.
heard, you feel like you belong,
That's right.
and that you're worth someone's time and energy and presence.
Yes, that you have value, that you are good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we have to continue to work as providers and citizens of the world to help people restore their sense of worth, because yeah, all the abuse we talked about, it damages that, right? And we
Yeah,
need to
so
reclaim
getting
that.
back to the abuse piece, it to me it seems like how we fight sexual trauma, sexual abuse, how we fight all this is by just listening and making
Yeah,
others feel important because they are important. And as a child experiences that, those children are going to have that
yeah,
resilience inherently to be like, hey,
yeah.
no, you can't touch me. Or, hey, mom,
Mm-hmm.
this person did touch me, right? Because they know that they
Mm-hmm.
matter, because they
Yeah.
feel that they've experienced their that they do matter from
Yes.
someone in their life. And that is how we
Mm-hmm.
preempt all these things,
Mm-hmm.
right? How we fight them.
Yes, exactly. It's really how we handle a situation that was disturbing or unideal that will help the child access their resilience.
Yeah. So when children know they matter, they
Mm-hmm.
become powerful. When humans at any age know that they matter,
Yes.
we
Yes.
become powerful humans.
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you for those words, because
Mhm.
I'm a mom too, and I created a blog for teenagers actually, and I
Mm.
feel like this is a narrative I put in there too. You matter. Know that you matter. And so this is
Yeah.
really resonating right now. Yeah.
So, Carolyn, please tell us where we could go to read your blog for teenagers, to read these things that you're publishing about your podcasts and all of that.
Yes, my blog for teens is called Let's Chat Animo with Caro. Because I use anime characters in my blogs to illustrate some topics. And I have also another blog. It's called Sweet the House of Enchantments. So it's about my own spiritual insights and
Mhm.
also mindful living that I like to share every week. So people are welcome to join that. I also have a YouTube channel called Dr. G's Dandelion Monologues, and I co-host a podcast with Christopher Arterson, and you participated in that podcast as a guest. That was wonderful. Thank you, Bronwyn. And it's called the Dandelion Reflections.
Okay. Any other places that you want to share that people can get in touch with you, or are those is that is that enough for you, or is there more?
Well, there's also the Journal of Psychiatry Reform, where I publish regularly, including the article we mentioned early about premature exposure to pornography as a form of sexual trauma. So I have had a lot of comments and
Mhm.
communications regarding that specific article, because I think it is an unaddressed need in our
Mhm.
world, how to deal with this topic and this set of experiences to become more fulfilled and healed and have a healthy
Mhm.
sexuality moving forward and breaking the cycle of trauma.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that into the public awareness and beginning that conversation. That seems really, really important and necessary. So thank you. And Carolyn, thank you for being on this podcast today. I'm so honored to have you as
Uh,
a guest.
Thank you so much, Bronwyn, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to have dialogues with you so far. I'm looking forward to more. Thank you for what you do.
You're very welcome. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.